Welcome to another interview. This is my second live interview on my YouTube channel. The first was with my husband. This is Karen. Karen was a client of mine this year. Initially, we met through her watching my videos on YouTube, and then we connected through Facebook Messenger, and I worked with her for a couple months, and then she came to one of my retreats this summer. And now I'm staying at her place. I'm rounding out my year here in Costa Rica. She lives in Costa Rica. And Karen has a very special story because Jehovah's Witnesses came into her life as she was in her late 40s, not growing up as a Jehovah's Witness. So Karen, if you just want to share how the Jehovah's Witnesses came into your life as a Jehovah's Witness, and then the story around you leaving.
Okay, well, it came into my life through my husband, my second husband. I had been divorced for maybe 7 years or so, and I was on my own in a very lonely time of my life. Like I had the empty nest syndrome, my children were all grown and gone. I had problems with my son who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. So it was a pretty difficult time for me. And when I started going on Match.com to try to, I felt like I needed somebody in my life. And when I found my current husband, soon to be ex, what drew me to him was he said that he had studied the Bible for 5 years. And at that point, I felt like I was missing something, that I was missing a spirituality. Something had convinced me that that was missing from my life. And so that attracted me to him, but he didn't tell me right away that he was a Jehovah's Witness.
And it wasn't it AA that initially tried to make you think about that spirituality aspect of your life?
Yes.
Okay.
When after I got divorced from my first husband, went through a series of traumatic events, and I started drinking heavily.
Okay.
So I went to AA and started attending there, and they teach you there that you have to have a higher power. And I tried everything. I kept relapsing, and I didn't know why. And they kept on saying, you need a higher power. So I figured that's what's missing in my life. And then I actually looked into other religions before I had met my second husband.
Okay.
But I wasn't happy with that.
Okay.
And I was willing to give him a chance. And when I met him, he didn't tell me he was a Jehovah's Witness. In fact, he had told me he was divorced. And I moved in with him, and about 6 months later, I found out he lied to me. He wasn't divorced. And then I decided to stay with him. I felt sorry for him. He had a lot of trauma in his life, and I had trauma in my life. I thought maybe we could help each other.
Trauma bond.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to raise your voice a little bit higher. So,
okay, sorry.
Because we all know that the voice doesn't carry very well on I'm recording from my phone. So that aspect of him having that spirituality that the AA was looking for you to connect with, and then you guys both coming from a lot of trauma, again, that trauma bond that connected you guys together, then you stayed connected. And I know that when you first got with him, he was an inactive witness. So what went from inactive to active, and was that conversation you guys had together, and then what was that transition like for you?
After about maybe a year, I'm kind of hazy on the exact time frame, but I became friends with his sister-in-law, and she was studying, and she showed me the tract of, I forgot which one it was. It was, do you want to know the truth? And it had 7 different things, and it really resonated with me. And I thought, yeah, I'd like to study, because she was really chalking it up and said that she was studying. So I said, okay, I'll give it a try. And I really enjoyed the studies that I had with this one woman. She was very, very friendly. I really liked it. A lot of the stuff, though, I couldn't grasp, like the blood issue. I'm an ICU nurse, and I know the biology, and I couldn't really accept it, but I figured, each religion doesn't mean you have to accept everything. There's so many people that go to different religions, and they just like go on Christmas or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured, okay, I can just go and just take it as it comes. And my husband was very happy that I was studying, and he would have all these conversations with me, and anytime I had a question like that, he would say, you just have to you just have to believe it right now. And not everybody knows everything right away. The truth is going to be, we still don't know everything. New light is always being shown. And even when things were changing, like things about like the 1914, and like, how do they know that? Who came up with that? And the thing that everybody was going to be resurrected on earth. I would have the conversations, where are all these people going to fit? All these people are going to be resurrected. Where are they going to live? But he always had an answer.
Okay. So then what led you up to your baptism? Because what year was this that you got baptized? You studied for a short amount of time.
Yeah, I met him in 2007. And because he wasn't divorced, his divorce dragged on for 3 years.
Right, because when you met him and started dating him, he was in inactive witness, and he was still married to his wife, who was a Jehovah's Witness, but she was inactive, correct?
Right, correct,
okay.
yeah.
So then you started living with him.
Right, started living with him.
He didn't get disfellowshipped. He got his...
Right, no, he didn't get disfellowshipped
because
right
he was
away.
inactive.
Right. So when I found out that he was a Jehovah's Witness and I started studying, then all of a sudden he felt so guilty. He couldn't sleep with me. He slept on the couch like for 3 years.
3 years?
Yeah,
Wow.
until we got married.
Okay.
And it was very strange. But you know what? I felt like, oh, he's got such strength.
Wow.
He has that much conviction of his religion. I almost kind of was not in awe of it, but I was like...
Impressed?
Yeah, I was impressed.
Impressed in a way.
Yeah, I was impressed in a way.
Okay.
That somebody had that much spirituality
Right.
that he could...
Withhold himself for that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
3 years you dated him. Because you
I
had
was living with him
living-
at that point.
living with him.
Living with him at that point.
And at how
And
long? Go ahead. I'm
even
sorry.
though I was studying, I found out we weren't supposed to be even living together.
Right.
And I was strongly encouraged to move out of his house. But he says, no.
Wow.
Because he had a lot of depression. I ended up like paying all the bills, and looking back on it, I think he targeted me in a way.
Absolutely, that totally makes sense. So living with him for 3 years, you were studying at that time, and then at what point did you then get baptized?
When his divorce finally became final, it was like January of 2010 or February. We were married with like in 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Because we were waiting for his divorce to become final before we could get married. So once we got married, he started going back to the meetings with me.
Okay.
But it was very uncomfortable because he knew that what he did was disfellowshippable. And he said that he could take that. It didn't matter to him. He was like so strong in the faith that if that's what they decided, then he would go with it. But it ended up, he didn't get disfellowshipped. He ended up getting privately reproved.
Okay. I'm curious, what was it like for you to know that he was still married? And did he tell you that he was divorced?
Yeah, he told me he was divorced when I met him.
And you
And when I found out from his brother, he let the cat out of the bag after about 6 months of living with him.
Who's also a Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah.
So he said that after 6 months, you found out he's still married, but you stayed with him.
I stayed with him. He said that, like that trauma bonding you were talking about. He had a lot of depression. He was slowly letting out things that had happened to him in the past. And I felt bad for him. And I could identify with him. I had a lot of empathy for him. And he treated me really nice at that point.
Well, I understand, but I also know that you are a people pleaser and you put other people before yourself. So just like constantly wanting to quote unquote fix him, and not even like you let yourself not be taking care of yourself and putting your full attention on him. Okay, so then you got married after 3 weeks of him getting a divorce, and then you got baptized.
Yeah, we couldn't get baptized. I couldn't get baptized until October. they kind of gave me a hard time about it
Okay.
because of him, I think, and they made me study with somebody, and it took me a while before they said I was ready. Like one of the elders kind of gave me a hard time when I told him I wanted to get baptized. He's like, "Oh, I forgot exactly what he said. That's pretty, like, bold or just really unkind comment." But the sister I was studying with says, no, no, no. If somebody wants to get baptized, you let them get baptized. And she
Right.
really stood up for me.
Okay.
And I was able to get baptized. I went through all the questions and
Okay.
answered them the way they wanted me to answer them, even though I really didn't believe all of them.
Okay, but I know that they love bombed you, and you had some good friends in the
Oh, yes,
in the
yes.
congregation.
Yeah. They became like my family.
And this was in New York.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they became like your family. You stayed in that same congregation from when you met Art to when
we
you
moved
got
to Costa
baptized.
Rica.
Okay,
Yeah.
so when you quit, that's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So you were there for about 10 years.
Yeah. 12 years, I guess.
12 years, okay. And then during that time, after you guys got baptized, or your ex was still was still an active witness. So you guys were active together as witnesses.
Yes. But he didn't go out in service. He
Okay.
was like, they call him the spiritually weak person.
Right.
And I wanted to be, because I'm such a perfectionist. I
Yes.
had to do everything right, and I
Yes.
had to do what everybody said. And I really liked the people that I was with. I hated going out in service, but these people my friends made it easier. And I liked the social aspect of it.
I would say that's what most people like, is the social aspect of service. They actually don't like knocking on people's door and getting
Oh, I
rejected.
hated it. I didn't even know what to say.
Right.
Like, I don't even know what I'm talking about. So how can I go to somebody and try to tell them this is the truth, and they start asking me questions? I have no idea what I'm even talking about.
Wow. And during those 12 years of you going to that congregation, what was your role? Were you pressured to start pioneering? Was your ex pressured to step up more in the...
Yeah, he was asked to step up, but he always had the excuse that he was a broken man and that he had depression and he had anxiety and he couldn't do any more possibly than he was already doing.
Okay.
And so they were kind to him. They understood it. I mean, there's so many people in the organization, as you probably know, that are broken people.
Oh, yeah.
Because it attracts broken people. It attracts vulnerable people.
Yep, exactly. So those 12 years that you were in the congregation, you picked up some friends along the way, and then at what point then did you decide to move to Costa Rica?
We had a good friend in our congregation who had bought property down in Costa Rica.
Okay.
And he really convinced us to take a look at it just to see what it's like, because he was just really talking it up and said how beautiful it was. So we did make a trip down, I think it was in 2018, and I loved it. But we were on the Nicoya Peninsula, which is very hot. And they didn't have any English congregations there. Our friend was going to the Spanish congregation, even though he didn't speak Spanish, but his wife did. So his dream was to build a house, and he was trying to convince us to buy the property next to him. My husband's a contractor, he builds houses for a living, so we figured he would have a good friend to help him build his house, I guess. But that fell through because my husband can't take the heat. And he said it was too hot, and there was no way he was moving to Costa Rica. And by that time, I was convinced that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to move there.
And I know initially you were looking into the Guanacaste area, which is more dry and more just like really hot.
We never even made it up that far.
Okay.
When I started investigating Costa Rica, first I went on the JW website. I found out where all the Kingdom Halls were, because that's the only way I could convince him to come down.
Of course.
And by this time, I had in my heart that I wanted to come, and I was ready to do anything to come down. I don't know why. It just felt like I wanted to.
I don't blame you at all. So then you guys ended up moving here right after the pandemic started.
We were supposed to move. My retirement date was supposed to be April 12th.
2020.
Yes.
Okay.
Right when the pandemic started.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, everything's closing down. My office is closing down. And I realized we don't have any health insurance. If I quit, we would have nothing.
Oh, geez.
So I had to rescind my retirement
Okay.
until October of that year. I think we were probably on the first plane that when they opened up the borders, we were on that plane coming down. Yeah.
Okay. Then you ended up moving here, and then at that time, the meetings were all through Zoom.
Yes.
So.
Oh, we came down a second time too. We came down to the Central Valley area and went to the English congregation in Naranjo and met the people there. And of course, they love bomb you there too.
Of course.
It's a small congregation. There's only 35 people, but they seem so friendly and so nice, and they had the best life ever.
One of the only English-speaking congregations here in Costa Rica. You said there's only a couple.
Yeah, I forget exactly, maybe 5 or 6 at the most.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is not a lot considering this is a whole country.
Yeah.
So then you go to this new congregation, you get love bombed, and this is toward the end of 2020. And then what led to you waking up, and how did that go for you?
Oh yeah, right before we moved down, I got disfellowshipped.
Okay, so talk about that a little bit.
It was for drinking.
Okay.
I had been starting to realize there was something really wrong in my marriage with him. And I wasn't able to tell him about it. I just felt like I couldn't. And I had this urge, maybe, and it was only maybe like 4 times a year. I would get a bottle of wine and do it secretly, thinking he wouldn't know, but he always figured it out. You can tell when somebody.
Of course.
And he got very disgusted with me, and I understand it. I understand where he was coming with that. And then I had gone to the elders a couple times about it.
So you went to the elders. He didn't go to the elders for you. So
He threatened that he was going to go if I didn't go.
Got it.
And this last time I did call, and I wanted help. I hated it. I didn't like having that addiction. And so they disfellowshipped me in August, knowing that it's a pandemic and that we were going to be moving to Costa Rica.
Wow.
Where I didn't know anybody. Wow. I didn't speak the language. It was in a new country, but they had no empathy or compassion whatsoever. They just felt, but you know what? I felt like I deserved it.
Of course, that's how we feel when we're in it. So this is August 2020.
Yes.
So 1 month before you come and move over here to Costa Rica.
Yeah, that was August, and then we moved down here in October.
So 2 months after.
Yeah.
And did you have to tell the elders in the congregation or the publishers that you were disfellowshipped, and what was that like?
Oh yeah. So I knew I was going to be disfellowshipped, going to be announced, but I had like 1 week to talk to people.
Of course, that's how it is.
I was
so stressful.
Yeah, it was very stressful, and I had a couple very good friends, and I talked to them, but they immediately cut me off.
Of course.
I even was going to AA, and I had a sponsor from another congregation who became my sponsor, because I had to have an AA person. You couldn't have a worldly person.
Of course.
And she refused to talk to me.
Wow.
And she said she had to follow Jehovah's arrangement.
Wow.
And yeah, that was pretty hurtful.
Okay. So then you moved from that congregation to then the English-speaking congregation in Costa Rica.
Right.
And what was that like for you? Because now you can't speak to anybody except for Art, and you were going to the meetings through Zoom.
Right. I had to be on the Zoom and just sit there like this and pretend like I'm paying attention. Meanwhile, he wasn't always on the Zoom meeting. Sometimes he'd turn the camera off. Sometimes he would go on the computer and play solitaire. Like he wasn't even there half the time, it seemed.
Okay. And then what did you think about that? Like, I'm sure it must have bothered you. You're the one who's disfellowshipped. He's the one who's supposedly active.
Yeah.
And setting the example as the head of the
household.
yeah.
He was all telling me I was ahead. I deserved to be disfellowshipped. It was my fault. I was, he called me, well, the same thing, what they said during the committee was that I was, what did they call me? Selfish. I brought reproach upon Jehovah.
Of course.
And I'm like, you don't understand. I don't like being like this. I came to you for help.
Right.
How can you do this?
Right.
And like, this isn't a loving situation, but they tell you that this is a loving arrangement. Disfellowshipping is a loving arrangement.
Of course.
Which I never, the 10 years or 12 years that led up to that, I never believed that was a loving thing to do to anybody.
Right. I totally get it. And then at what point did you say enough's enough? You're watching the meetings through Zoom.
Well, yeah, so during that whole year, my husband decided, I don't know, he was an isolator. He had a lot of depression and a lot of things that had happened to him. But his go-to was he would zone out watching TV all the time. And he would just watch TV all day long. And he was watching these YouTube videos about women cheating on their husbands. And it was all women cheating on their husbands. I said, what about all the men that are cheating on the... Well, this is therapy for me. This is helping me because his first wife cheated with his brother. His second wife, I think, he says, didn't believe, thought he was faking his depression, and she accused him of, he accused her of having an affair or something, and he wanted her out. He says he gave her money to leave.
Who knows about that?
Who knows, exactly.
Right.
And, after thinking back of all the things that he told me, like even my daughter said, you can't believe the thing that comes out of that guy's mouth.
No, not at all. So then what happened after that?
So I did get reinstated. I wrote one letter, it got rejected. They said it was too soon. And then maybe about 10 months later, I did get reinstated. There was a big to-do because I was in Costa Rica, and I got disfellowshipped in a different congregation, and there was a lot of miscommunication between the two, and there was a COVID going on, and you couldn't meet in the Kingdom Hall, and they said, oh, you have to be in the Kingdom Hall, but we can't meet in the Kingdom Hall. So I'm like, okay, so where does that leave me?
Right. So this was like July 2021.
So
when you got reinstated?
Yeah, about that. I think it was like June.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're still on Zoom meetings.
But I'm still privately reproved.
Okay, so then you
I couldn't answer or comment, which at that point I was happy.
Okay.
Then I started doing their fake field service meetings. What a joke. They made you go on like you're in field service on Zoom with everybody else there, and they would have you like write letters to people.
What?
But in Costa Rica, you can't, there's no mail, as you know.
Yep.
You can't mail the letters. And they said, well, you can write a letter, and they found like these sneaky, deceiving ways to get these letters and stuffed with a wake or whatever. Like at the grocery store, you could hand them a thank you note and tell them thank you for your service, and then include like a jw.org card, and then that counts as a field service, as a calling.
Wow.
And I'm like, so these letters aren't going anywhere. We're just supposed to hold on to them until we're given direction as to what to do with them.
Oh my gosh.
It was like so fake, and I'm like beginning to say to myself, what the F?
Right.
And meanwhile, Art wasn't doing anything. He was not participating in it. He thought it was a joke.
Okay.
So.
And at what point did you then decide you didn't want to go to the meetings anymore?
So we had to go back to New York. He had to have a shoulder replacement surgery.
Okay.
So we were there for about 4 weeks. And during that 4-week time, we weren't going to any of the meetings, which I was happy with. We were too busy with all his doctor's appointments and doing all this stuff. And then after a surgery, I'm like, I just realized how happy I was. And it clicked with me. The reason I'm happy, I'm not going to freaking meetings anymore.
Jeez.
And then I had a good friend whose daughter was disfellowshipped because she decided she didn't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. And she was just devastated that she couldn't speak to her daughter. Like for a full year, she was just crying all the time. She was very lonely. But she was like, had to go by with Jehovah's arrangement. I'm like, that is so wrong. And then the women, there was out of 35 publishers in the meeting down here, at least 3 or 4 of the women had children that they never talked to because they left the truth. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Wow.
And one of them hadn't even talked to, didn't even know where their child was. Didn't even know where they were living, didn't talk to them, and they were like, oh, that's their choice. They're the ones that decided to leave Jehovah. So, and that just broke my heart.
Right.
I'm like, there's something wrong here.
Right.
And especially the whole disfellowshipping thing. I'm like, this is not a loving, I don't care what they're saying. It's not loving. So as he was recovering on the couch, something just clicked. I said, something to do with the governing body. I'm like, who are they? They think they're appointed by God? Who appointed them? How do they know they're appointed by God? So I started just Googling, and the first thing I came up with was, well, one of the first things I would trust was written by a previous governing body member, Ray Franz, Crisis of Conscience. And when I read that, oh my God, he just verified every single thing that I already felt in my heart.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, here. And then he got disfellowshipped for just questioning. I'm like, this is baloney.
Wow.
And then from there, it just snowballed. I was just reading everything that I possibly could. But still, I was trying to save my marriage.
Right, of course.
And I came across a few people like Wendy Renee. There was an interview that she did about how to talk to your spouse if they haven't woken up yet. But I realized quickly that it wasn't going to work in my case. Because when we came back after his surgery, we went on the Zoom meeting. And I was kind of antsy. I wasn't paying attention. I was getting up and doing things. He goes, what's wrong with you? How come you're all over the place? And then they were saying something about 1975. I'm like, yeah, I guess they got that wrong, didn't they? And then something else. I said, like, they got that wrong too. And he got so angry with me, telling me that I could get his fellowship for saying things like that, that he was almost ready to go, that I was an apostate, that he felt like he even needed to go to the elders and talk to them. And so then, yeah, I started reading all these books, but doing it secretly. I started journaling and writing down all the things that he had said to me throughout our marriage. And I'm reading this to myself. I'm like, oh my God, I put up with this crap from him? And I realized he was emotionally and psychologically abusive to me. And I found out later he's a covert narcissist. And I had no idea. It wasn't until a friend told me, started sending me like these memes and these posts about what a covert narcissist was. And then I found that the JW organization is so narcissistic.
Absolutely.
So I'm writing all these things down. I kept journals about, everything just added up. I'm like, I can't stay in this. So when I told him that I wanted to leave, that I didn't really believe in it anymore, he again blew up at me, called me all these filthy names. And then the next day he kind of simmered down. He was trying to reason with me. And then I guess he had gone to one of the elders that's told on me or something, I don't know. And so, I don't think what happened then. Oh yeah, he said, okay. I said, well, I want to be like you were when we met. I want to be inactive, just like you were when we met. And maybe I said, I don't know how that's going to work, because if you have people over to our house and they know I'm inactive, or in fact, he told me to write a letter of dissociation. So I wrote a couple letters, and 2 letters, said, okay, these are just some samples that I got from the internet. I want to tweak them. And then he blew up at one of them because I said I had been thinking about it for a year. He got really angry because why didn't I tell him I was even having any doubts? He's the head of our household. I should have gone to him. I should have been able to talk to him. And I realized very suddenly, or not suddenly, I realized that this just wasn't going to last. And then we went on a trip we had bought an RV, and we went on a little winter trip, and I just knew it was going to be over. And we were planning on, we had rented our house when we came down to Costa Rica. So the plan was we were going to sell the house. And I figured once we sell the house, then I would tell him I want a divorce. Because I didn't trust him. If I told him, let the cat out of the bag, he would have done something to squash my plans. So everything was like in secret. And then I was like, I don't know how we can stick this out for another 3 months. And that's when I met you. I found out you. Yeah, I was like trying to find people who had been through it or had been ex-Jehovah's Witness. And I was on all the forums and reading a lot of their stories, which really helped me a lot. And I was like pouring out my story on there, and people were telling me, "You're a nurse with the purse. Get rid of him. He's just using you. He's abusing you. You need to get out." And after I like hear this and started journaling and reading all this, like, yeah, they're right. I mean, like, I just need to save myself at this point. And then one thing, so there was another episode where he told me if I ever drank again, that was it. He was leaving. And so I did drink again because I was just under so much pressure because I knew I was going to leave, and I was like plotting. I had already contacted like a divorce lawyer and trying to keep everything secret. And I was like, I had a pseudonym because I was afraid he would find out what I was doing. And it was kind of scary in a way for me. And so when that happened, he, like, I'm kind of hazy about exactly what happened at that point. But that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. And that night, I already knew I was going to leave. But then he got, I mean, I know I shouldn't have been doing it. I was packing my clothes. I was hiding, going into the car. I wasn't planning on leaving that night because I knew that I couldn't leave that night, and I don't drive at night. But he says, "What are you doing?" He found me when I had the keys in my hand. I didn't want him to have my keys because I had my stuff in the car. And he became physically violent with me. So I said, that's it. I ended up racing out of the house at one point because I thought he was going to come back and get more physically abusive with me. And I went to the next door neighbors, who were very, very nice people. They were Costa Rican, but I became very good friends with the one girl. She's only 15, but she's like my buddy. She's really cute. And they also, they were really consoling to me. They said, "We know you." And because he came up and he knocked on the door and he told them what a horrible person I was, and that I was an alcoholic and that I couldn't be trusted, and all this kind of stuff. And then I was saying that he was saying, "I'm not a wife beater. She's trying to tell you that I am." Like, and I was like, they saw the bruises and everything on my arm. If you're going to just take the keys from somebody, you take the keys from somebody. You don't continue. Because he got really angry and violent. And he still denies it to this day. So, and by that point, okay, I have to back up a little bit. When I told him I didn't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore, I realized it's going to be a lonely existence for me down here. And I said, well, I want to start meeting other friends besides Jehovah's Witness people. And he really wanted nothing to do with it. But I joined a Facebook group, and I met this really lovely woman, and she was so friendly, and I met her for lunch, and we just really bonded but he wanted nothing to do with her. And basically I could tell that it was going to be a pretty lonely time for me. It was already lonely. But he wasn't on board with me having any other friends. He was only Jehovah's Witnesses. That's all he could.
You found friends rather quickly because you have so many friends here. It's like crazy.
Yes.
You've only been in this area for a short period of time, and I feel like you have more friends here than you did in the U.S. and you were living there your whole life, which is amazing.
Yeah, I met such a wonderful group of people here. Yeah, and they're true friends. They really care about you. They genuinely care about you. They're not going to tell you, they won't speak to you just because you don't want to go to the Kingdom Hall.
Right. There's a great a retirement, I would say, community here in this area, retirement-ish, like 50 plus, and it's very like homey here. Whereas people were very inviting, and they're very slow and casually when they speak to you, so nothing is rushed and everything is just really Pura Vida. Like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
very slow and chill.
Yes.
And people really want to get to know you. They're
Yeah,
not just
I
like,
really love it here.
they're not just like, oh, how are you doing? And then they're just asking that, and then they're off in their own way. They like actually talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very nice community that you have here, and I've met some of your friends who are lovely, lovely people.
Yes.
So I know that your divorce is gonna be final. How has life been?
It was very stressful at first. When when the last little when I called my friend to come pick me up that morning. He had to leave. I was able to sneak back down to the car, and I went into the window and opened up the door because he had everything locked. And I was able to get my purse. I was mostly concerned about that because I had my passport and my credit cards. And it turned out he actually stole my credit cards out of my purse, and I didn't find out about it until the next day.
Wow.
In fact, I had to ask the people, my next door neighbors, to call the police because I was ready to go to the police at this point. But I was still in Costa Rica. They give you 5 days for the other person to come down and give their statement. But by that point, I was already going to be going back to New York in 3 days. I wasn't going to even be here. So I couldn't even file a police report. So I called my daughter, and actually she called me. I was having lunch. She goes, "What's going on?" I'm like, "Why?" And she says, "Well, we just got a phone. Art just called." And he said, "I hate to tell you this, but your mom fell off the wagon." And she's accusing me of being a wife beater. And she said, "Well, did you?" And he says, "Well, she was trying to get into the car when she was drunk, and I had to take the keys from her, and if anything, I might have hurt her pinky finger." And then I realized I didn't have my credit cards. And I found that my next door neighbor, she texted me, and she had the pictures of the credit cards that he dropped off at her house. So I went and picked them up. And at that time, I'd already made arrangements for 2 divorce lawyers from when we went back to New York. And yeah, it was just a really stressful period of time at that point. But I did go back, and I lived with my daughter for a good portion of the time. And so he got served with divorce papers, and I was like so anxious that they weren't going to find him at home, because he is like a slippery little person that knows all about getting served subpoenas, because he's had a history of that. Him and his brother, they got involved with lawsuits and all kinds of stuff that wasn't very Christian-like, in my opinion. So anyway, he did get served, thank goodness.
Okay.
So everything I planned everything. I just had this gut instinct and survival instinct just takicked in, and I knew what I had to do.
Where does it leave you right now? How is the situation like now? I know you said that you're not fully divorced yet.
Yeah.
How is the situation like now that you have your own place by yourself, and he's still in Costa Rica, but you're now separated, about to be divorced? How are you feeling right now about the whole situation?
Oh, I feel such relief. I feel like I have a new lease on life. I feel like a completely different person, like even when I first met you. And I'm reading back on some of my journals thinking, oh my God, I was feeling like that. Like I wanted to save my marriage. What, is that crazy?
I mean, even a month and a half ago, I asked you to share your story, and you said no, because you're afraid.
I was very afraid. I don't know. I didn't want people.
Sorry about this.
That.
You didn't want anyone to find you.
Yeah, I didn't want anybody to find me. And people, some of my really good friends in the old congregation were texting me, trying to see how I was. I'm like, I'm not making any contact with anybody.
Right.
And so I didn't for the longest time, for a few months, until I finally did. And then, because I know that I could be disfellowshipped.
Right.
And I don't really care anymore.
Right, and I get it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And
they can do whatever they want, but I will never go before a judicial committee ever again. I won't answer the phone if they call. So I guess they could announce me if they want. They could if they want, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. But at this point, I don't care.
Well, I am so proud of the progress you made in such a short period of time.
Me
like
too.
such
Me
a
too.
short period of time.
Yeah.
It's been
And my two daughters are so happy.
Oh.
I was able to reestablish my relationship with them and my two grandchildren, and I missed out so much of their lives.
Jeez. Well, you're making up for it now.
Yeah.
It's been less than a year since you left the JWs, and you're doing so well. And I love the fact that I've been part of this journey with you. It's been absolutely amazing, and I love that I'm ending my year long in Costa Rica.
I'm so grateful you were here. That's awesome. I was so happy when I saw your post that you were here helping ex-JW women. I'm like, oh my God, and she's right here.
Thank you again for sharing your story. I know it means a lot to you and to me that you're sharing the story. We never went into details about your upbringing because that was, you had a lot of trauma that brought you into the Jehovah's Witnesses. And as we talked about, the Jehovah's Witnesses are, the prey for them is vulnerable people. So
yes,
it was, you were a perfect
I
candidate.
was a perfect candidate.
That.
He went like that and hooked me with a fishing line.
Yeah, and like you said, you guys had the trauma bond. He had a lot of trauma as well, so that brought you guys together. And then obviously when that didn't work out, you guys were single again, and now you're doing so much better. He's still in his little bubble of whatever the trauma that he's went through.
I learned about covert narcissists, and you have to like do gray rocking. You just have to have no contact with them, because it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what you say to them, even if you want to.
Right.
And so I'm good with that.
Fantastic.
It's even better. And I agreed to the interview because I realized how much it helped me when I saw other people. So I want to pay it back and help other people too, if I can.
And you will.
I hope so.
Thank you, Karen, for this interview. Thank you for watching. Thank you for, hopefully this came up pretty good. I'm recording this from my phone. See you guys next time on another video.